I am joined today by Keith. Keith Abram, welcome.
Thanks, Emma. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Great to be with you too. I'm really looking forward to this one. And as my final guest of the year, I think this is a great topic to be rounding out the year on and looking forward to next year. So really interested to get into it with you. But before we start talking about goal setting and the framework to be doing that with more impact, love to understand a little bit more about your own career history, Keith, and your own career journey and how you came to be traveling the world, helping people to to set better goals and have greater impact.
Well, not a traditional career path.
Not
I
really.
yeah, I wasn't very good at school. In actual fact, I dropped out of school in year 10 and I went and got a job with a guy called Klaus. He was a 6'4" German bricklayer. He was a man mountain, blonde peroxide head, flat top, spoke very little English, but what he would yell at me continuously is, yeah, more mud, which means go and get more cement, go and get more bricks. And so I did that for about 6 weeks until I got to know Klaus really well. And I found out that back in Germany, Klaus held the German record for laying the most amount of bricks in a day. And so I all of a sudden realized that this was not the guy I needed to work for. I needed to work from probably the slowest guy from Germany, not the fastest guy. And I took the easy road and I went back to school. And I repeated year 10, did year 11, got through year 12. And, halfway through year 12, my mum come to me and she said, son, you and I got to have a talk. And when your mum has that type of, that type of language and that emphasis, you go, this is not going to be good. And so she sat down with me and she said,
No.
look, I haven't seen a report card. I've never seen you do homework. I have never seen you read a book. And she said, I don't think school's for you. And she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And my mum, probably like your mum and everybody listening to this podcast, true problem solvers. And so she said, I'll get you a job. And now my mum worked for the local council on the Gold Coast, and she had the role of, I suppose you can call it graft and corruption, Emma, not at the highest level, but
Love it.
she was a tea lady. And so what she'd do is she would walk around in the morning with the two urns on her trolley and give people tea or coffee and a couple of biscuits. And so she knew everybody in the council. And so she asked people, have you got a job for my
Absolutely.
son?
Yeah.
And if somebody said no, they didn't get tea and coffee for a week. And if somebody said yes, they got Tim Tams on a Friday. So it was, and so I started my working
Important
career
motivation.
in, in local government. I started in water supply and sewage, but I was motivated to get out of sewage, and I worked my way up to the prestigious position of noxious weed inspector. And I used to travel down the
There you
Gold Coast
go.
Highway at 60 miles an hour, 100 kilometres an hour, looking for noxious weeds. I didn't find too many. And my boss came to me one day and he said, we'd like you to go on a week-long leadership program. And you got to understand that I didn't think I was a leader until he said to me, you get a week off work with full pay. And I thought, you know what, maybe I am a leader and I don't know it. And so, that was when I got first introduced to goal setting at 24 years of age. And I just said, there's got to be something more than doing what I'm doing. And I just started developing myself and reading books and going to seminars and doing workshops. And my next role was an operations manager for a security business. And, we grew that from 4 people to 20 people in about, 20 months. And then on the Gold Coast, and then I decided to move to Brisbane. And I looked after a couple of donut stores and then got a job working for an organisation called Radio Rentals. And I was their Brisbane area manager. I looked after 9 stores, about 65 staff and about 25,000 customers and a $15 million budget. And that was my first real sort of, that was my first serious, corporate role. And then from there, I sort of really sat down and I went, I had they sort of said to me, look, you're going great. We're going to restructure things. We've got a role for you in Sydney. And I really sat down and I went, is this what I want to do? Because, originally at the leadership program, I thought, I want to be a CEO of a company. That's what I want to do. And I realized that I just love developing people. So I ran a youth development program for for corporate companies where they send us their emerging leaders and we take them out in the bush for a week. And that's when Suncorp approached me to come and work for them and still run that program. And I did that for about 6 years until I decided that I'd like to be a professional speaker. So I've done management, I've done training, and I thought, and I had a couple of my people that approached me and said, "Oh, could you run a workshop for us, on a weekend?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to, no worries." And they said, "Oh, we want to pay you." And
Mm.
I said, "Oh, okay."
Okay.
You know, and didn't know what to charge, didn't know what to do. I started out, charging, my first job was $1,000 for the day. And the only reason why I, pulled that number out of my, out of midair was we had consultants in at Suncorp at the time that were charging $1,500 a day. And I thought I've got to be half as good as them. And then the fast food industry kicked in and said, well, it's all about the upsell. So I said, I'm going to do the one day. I'm going to actually do a 30-day follow-up, and that's going to be the $1,000. And they said, okay. And they said, what else can you do for us? And that started me on a journey. I went home to my wife and I said, you know what? I might do this. I might give this a go. We didn't have kids. We had a mortgage. We didn't have kids. And I thought, what's the worst thing they can do is I'll go and get a real job. Well,
Yeah.
I haven't had a real job in the last 30 years.
It's such a quite a counterintuitive question, I think, but what's the worst that can happen? I think is actually a great question to ask in those scenarios because, often once you kind of name the fears, once you kind of go, well, actually the worst thing that can happen is that maybe it doesn't work and maybe I come back and, as you say, get a quote unquote real job and neither of those things are that bad. And also, what if it does work? Like, what might that look like?
Well,
What
and
amazing
here's what it's
future
looked
could be
like.
out there?
For me,
Yeah.
Hall of Fame speaker, best-selling author of 5 books, just about to release my 6th one in March next year. You've spoken to 1.7 million people in 43 different countries and have been,
Wow. Cool.
successfully, I've spoken to audiences as large as 10,000 people and as small as 6. I flew to Mexico City a couple of years ago, 2019, to speak to 16 people because they asked, that I was an authority in this area
Mm.
of, business growth and goal setting. But the 16 CEOs that were in the room, I was the only person that flew in on commercial aircraft. Everyone else flew in on private, and everyone else flew in with security. And I just jumped on a plane and turned up in Mexico City. And
That sounds like a fascinating room to be
oh,
in.
it was a great room to be in. Billion dollar, like a few billion-dollar companies in the room. And so, and I go, gee whiz, he's just a little old uneducated noxious weed inspector from the Gold Coast. So that's been the journey so
It's a
far.
great
A-
story.
And
I love it.
and you know what, Em? I'm
Oh,
just getting started. I'm just getting started. So, and I love what you said there
I
before about
believe
that
that.
question. I think a lot of us or a lot of people don't ask the question around, I think we always need perspective. And so, what's the best thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? What's the most likely thing that's going to happen? You know,
Yeah.
Often we look at things and we look at it from this is going to be fantastic. This is going to be the best thing since sliced bread. Or we look at it, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And I just think you have to give yourself perspective.
I totally agree. I think it's one of the actually probably one of the most important things and that sort of context, I guess, as well around perspective. And as I said, I think it's almost quite a counterintuitive question, but I think we tend to shy away from asking it and I think when you do that, the potential fears grow. They can kind of take on a life of
Yeah.
their own. Whereas if you actually kind of bring them into the light, as it were, and name them and look at them and go, that thing's actually not that bad. And if that is the worst case scenario and that happened, what would I do? Well, I'd do X, Y, and Z. Well, that's okay. That no longer feels like such a huge risk because I've kind of thought through it and got a bit more clarity on what it may or may not look like.
Yeah.
Goal setting, Keith. Simple thing. Goal setting.
Yeah.
Sounds so easy. Talk me through it. Talk me through your approach.
Yeah.
And also I think perhaps sounds a slightly silly question to ask, but why is it so important? Like, why does it matter that we get it right?
Well, firstly, the thing that I've built my whole, career around has been how do we the one question that I've asked continuously is how do we help people set and achieve goals faster, easier, sooner? Because what's the opposite of that? Slower, harder, never. And so
Mhm.
the real key around it is not so much goal setting, but goal achievement. And if you're going to achieve any type of goal, firstly, just some methodology around this. If you're going to achieve any type of goal, you need to have an emotional, a mental, and a physical connection. See, most people, Emma, they just go, "Oh, my goal is X, and I need to do this to achieve it." And I sort of come from a different approach. I use what's called a how formula. And lots of people, or you should start with why. And my thought around this is don't start with why. Why is too hard. For you to find
Mm,
your why in your life is you got to go and sit on a
yeah.
rock in the middle of a rainforest for 2 weeks to work it out.
Yeah.
But I can ask you right now, let's talk about your career. So if you're listening to this, you're watching this podcast, and I say in 2026, how do you want to feel about your career? And of the 135 different emotions you and I can experience as adults, 64 of them are positive. Of the 64, they break down to what I call 8 goal drivers. People want to feel successful. People want to feel purposeful. People want to feel inspired. People want to feel happy. People want to feel organized. People want to feel respected. People want to feel confident, and people want to feel relaxed. So if I say to you, or if you're listening to this, of those 8, how do you wanna feel? "Oh, Keith, I wanna feel purposeful." Great, fantastic. What
Mm,
do you need to achieve in your career in 2026 for you to feel purposeful? And that's the goal that you should pursue. And it should be a big, bold goal. It should be a goal that is year defining. It should be that catalyst for something that's bigger, better, and, for you. Which means you're probably gonna have to be braver. You probably gonna have to be bolder. You probably
mhm.
have to gonna be better to accomplish it. And so now you know how you wanna feel, what you want to achieve. Now you ask yourself the question, why is this goal so important for me to achieve so I feel that emotion? And you need at least 5 reasons why. Because unless you've got enough reasons why, any excuse will do. Too hot, too cold, too many, too few,
Yeah.
too little, too much, too hard, too easy. And any excuse will do. And so once you've done that and you've dug deep and you've found the real reason why it's important, why it matters, why it's going to make a difference to you and to the people who mean the world to you, then you ask the final question, which is who? Who can help you achieve this goal? Because whos accelerate accomplishment. When you when you humble yourself enough to, read the book or to talk to the mentor or to listen to the podcast or to watch the YouTube tutorial, all of those are whos. You and I are who to somebody listening to this, watching this today. You and I are a who. And so when you combine those 3 components, what happens is you start to become committed, compelled, and connected to that goal. And when you are committed, compelled, and connected to that goal, you will do the uncomfortable, the inconvenient, and the unknown.
Mm,
Because that's the chasm you have to go through to get what you want. And on the other side of every goal is abundance, is because if you think of it, a goal gives you more of something. That's abundance. So, whatever you want more of in your life, what's the goal that will precede that? And so that's the formula I teach people. And depending on, you know, how long a time I have with them. That can be a 4-part formula, it can be a 6-part, or it can be a 9-part. And we've used that process with billion-dollar businesses and with sporting, professional sports people and people who are trying to be professional sports people and, and organizations and sales teams, all around the globe. And that's my take on goal setting. You know, the whole SMART goals just doesn't work because it doesn't
Mm.
have an emotional
Yeah.
connection to it. So, this is
Yeah, that's the bit that's the bit that really resonated for me, that emotional component. As you were saying it, that was the kind of the light bulb, if you like, of that sort of moment of, that's why some things, like you said, you'll walk through fire to achieve, and others you're like, maybe not.
yeah,
Maybe it's not that important to me.
yeah.
And that's, as you said it, I was like, that's actually what it's coming down to. It's the ones that you've got that emotional connection to, that you will do the uncomfortable. I forgot the other two that you
Well,
said, the
the uncomfortable,
uncomfortable
the
things
inconvenient, and
to
the
get to.
unknown, like
Mm,
that's what you have to walk through to get, the goal that you want. And you've got to build an emotional connection to it because that will, help sustain you through the difficult, through the things that you have to do to be able to accomplish that goal. And so, when I
when
talk to
you're
people, if we really are thinking about how people accomplish infinite possibilities, then you have to create unstoppable velocity. That's your drivers, that's your emotional connection. You have to have, you have to have a mindset that there is a unlimited abundance for you, and that's really about making sure that you are really crystal clear on what you really want more of in your life, and then what are the goals that precede that, and then of course you think about having unwavering determination because setting the goal and writing it out and everything like that, that's all great, but then the one thing I do know is that as soon as you set a goal that's important to you, the universe has a funny way of saying, "Are you serious?" And that's the test. It's the classic. I'm going to shed a few kilos. I'm going to start Monday morning. That's Monday morning. It's raining. Monday morning. You know, I you know, I, and then what, I'm going to eat healthy. And that's the day somebody has their birthday at work and they bring in cake,
yeah,
you know, and so, it's the universe saying, "Are you
it's
serious?"
so
And,
true.
you know, let's just give you a bit of a test.
I'm Yeah, I'm laughing as you say it because it's so true. Can think of so many examples of that.
Yeah.
I'm really interested, Keith, when you take people through this process and you talk about that emotional component and you've sort of started with, okay, what's the big goal, and then you go to that, what emotion do you want to feel? Do people find that question quite easy to answer? Do
Yeah.
people find that
Yeah.
quite hard
The
to
the the
answer?
emotional
Do they
side.
know?
So if I say to you, "Tell me what your purpose is." "Oh, geez, I'm not sure. I have to think about that." But I say to you, "Well, how do you wanna feel?" Yeah, pick any area of your life.
Mm,
Pick your health, pick your relationships, pick your career, pick your, pick the connection with family, pick any area of your life. And I say, "Well, how do you want to feel?" And people go, "Oh, I want to feel successful in this area. I want to feel happy." I mean, it
mm.
is a less than a 20-second response to the question. It might be a little bit longer in an answer. It could be, "Well, I want to feel happy and I also want to feel successful." I go, "Okay." And then you say, "Okay, now that you know that, tell me what do you think you have to achieve to feel that?" "Wow, I'd have to be, I'd have to hit my target at work." "Okay, great. Well, so what you've just told me is, I think there's 4 types of goals you're gonna set, by the way. You're gonna set a vague goal, a fuzzy goal, a specific goal, or a detailed goal. And so the vague goal is, I sort of I need to achieve in my career. And like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Or people
What
go,
would
well,
you
it's a
like to
fuzzy goal.
achieve?
I think I need to be able to do this, or it could be this. And so it's a bit fuzzy. And people tend to stop at a specific goal. Oh, I need to hit my number by the 30th of June. And I need to, I need to be able to accomplish this and deliver on this project. And I mean, that's pretty specific. But the difference between a specific goal and a detailed goal is that the detailed goal is the story. It's the story that
Mhm.
you read to yourself that crystallizes your intention. It uplifts your frequency and it creates this vibration of accomplishment. And what that really starts to do for you is it just builds up a head of momentum and more importantly, belief that this is accomplished. I can accomplish this. And that detailed story could be, I will be the number one salesperson in my organization. I will achieve that by hitting not only my, I will achieve that by hitting my target 1.5 months prior to my deadline, which will give me the opportunity to do either a +5 or a +10 more of my budget. I'll be recognized at our national conference as an outstanding sales leader, and I'll receive this bonus from my organization. But on top of that, I'll be the person that will be able to share these insights with colleagues around the country and will be looked upon as a go-to person for working with high valued clients moving forward. And for this, I'll be able to, with the bonus and the accomplishment, I'll be able to celebrate with my family on a trip to Fiji, where I'll reset what I need to do differently to be able to move forward because I have spent this year working on better relationship skills, utilizing AI to assist me with my back end admin, blah, 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 blah. And I build a story that's
Mhm.
detailed.
So much more powerful. Yeah, even just listening to it, you can there's texture to it. You can feel it actually, but you can get a real sense of what that looks like in the real world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so these are the small distinctions, Emma. People go, "Oh, I don't seem to
Mhm.
be able to achieve my goals." Well, you're probably not using this formula. And understand this, I've spent the last 30 years researching and studying and using myself as the guinea pig on what do we need to do differently to accomplish our goals because I'm befuddled when I sit down and I look at and I talk to people and they're smart and they're intelligent and they've got everything going for them and they're not achieving. Why is that? Well, it's not because they're not doing the work or it's not because they're not smart enough. It's because they don't have the connection to the goal. You have to build a relationship with your goal. That's why you write, you have to have a detailed goal that you read, that you build a relationship.
When you're having these types of conversations, and I think back to something you said at the beginning there around having that kind of abundance mindset, that sense of anything is possible. I can achieve big things, probably bigger things than you ever realize. How does that message land sometimes? Can there be sort of inbuilt blockers for people where they hear that message and think, "Oh, I'm not sure that that's for me," or,
100%.
"Can I really
100%.
do that?"
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, the blocker is belief. See, you can't
mhm,
outdream your self-esteem. If you don't think you're worthy, deserving, capable, well, you won't pursue it. So, well, do I need to build my self-esteem before I go for the goal? Do I need to go for the goal to build my self-esteem? Well, the one thing we do know is you set a result, you take action, you get a result, and your belief is built, which means you set better goals, you take better action, you get better results, you have better belief. And this is this spirals upwards. And
Mm.
what always holds most people back is belief. And the belief is, am I worthy? Am I deserving? Am I capable? Am I good enough? And what we have to change is our internal dialogue, Emma. We have to move from am I to I am. See, when the little voice in the back of your head goes, am I good enough to be able to achieve that? Am I capable enough of that? We have to choose the am I to I am. Because what would happen if you started saying to yourself, well, I am good enough, I am worthy, I am deserving, I am capable. I we move from questioning ourselves, and questioning builds doubt, to affirming
Mm.
ourselves, and affirming builds belief. And so we get people to not just talk themselves into it, but we get them to take that action that then starts to go, well, you know what? Well, I could do this. And the best way to build self-confidence, self-belief, self-love, self-esteem, the best way to do that is to feel like you are moving towards what you want and moving away from what you don't want. And and also to pick a mindset. Lots of people, go, "Oh, I just need to be positive." Well, I've been now doing this for 30 years and another 10 years before that, reading books and going to seminars and stuff like that, and people saying you got to be positive. Well, be positive is a blood type. It's not a mindset. You know, this is about you. This is about you picking a mindset. And if you're listening or watching this, for the next 30 days, pick a mindset. It could be that you're courageous. Why should I have a mindset of courage? Because it takes courage to change. See, we often think of courage as the person who does something that's brave, but what we need to do is we need to be brave enough to do something different. Or it could be tenacity. You have a tenacious mindset. In other words, you just have a mindset, I don't have to finish first, I just have to finish. I think my only superpower is that I am more tenacious than most people. That's how come I've had longevity in my career, because I'm tenacious. I hang in there. I just hang in there, hang in there, hang in there, hang in there. But it could be that what if you had a mindset that you're unlimited? I've got unlimited opportunities. I have unlimited energy to take advantage of. Well, what would happen if you had if you had greater self love? If you're no longer your harshest critic, your worst enemy, but all of a sudden you became your super coach, you become your greatest cheerleader. And what would happen in your life? What would happen in your life if you were empowered? If you're no longer waiting for someone to give you permission to step into your potential, you were no longer waiting for the pat on the back from someone to say you could do it. What if you did that for yourself? And what if you had a mindset of gratitude? Still, I think it's really easy to be grateful when everything is great, but you have to be
Yeah.
grateful when it's crappy. Because when you find the gratitude in the disappointment, or when it all goes pear-shaped, that's where you learn. And if you can find the learning, you can move on from the disappointment. You can move on from feeling like you were shafted, or whatever it was. How many people do you know, Emma, or for people listening, that are still bitter and twisted about something that happened 10 years ago and they've never moved on from it? And that
Yeah.
whole scenario, situation still owns them because they haven't learned from it. I'm not saying this is not about forgiveness. You don't have to forgive that person who did the wrong thing by you, but you have to find the learning so you can move on from it. And so the mindsets I've just talked about there, what I'd say to people is pick one of them, and for the next 30 days, from the soles of your feet to the top of your head and every cell in your body, be that mindset. And if you were, what would happen? How would you turn up? How would you walk? How would you
Yeah.
talk? How would you think? What would you say to yourself? What would you say to us if you were empowered, or had greater self love, or were courageous or tenacious? How would you turn up? So the thing I'd say to people is pick a mindset.
The thing I particularly love about that and really resonates as well is that you've got a choice there. Like, just because it is a certain way, or you're built a certain way, or your mind runs a certain way, doesn't mean that that's how it has to be going forward. That you've got a choice. You can choose to do something differently. You can choose to ignore that critical voice in your head, or reframe that critical voice in your head, or change the words that that voice uses, as you said, I am instead of am I, or and you have that ability, you have that power, if you like, to make those choices for yourself.
Everybody's got a choice. I think, people go, "Oh, there's nothing to be grateful for." Yeah, yeah, there is. You can be grateful because you have choices. There was something
Yeah,
about a
absolutely.
month or so went pear-shaped with us, and we were, talking about it, and we're going, "This is, shit." This is, you know but then we went, "Hold it, hold it, hold it. What are we grateful for here?" Well, we're grateful because 'cause we've got other options. If you feel like you've never got another option or you've got another choice, well, then you're going to be pretty. But you've always got another choice or another option. And sometimes you just have to take a step back so you can see that, so you can move forward, towards it. So, I just, part of this process is that if you want to develop your determination to be able to, apply the right mindset and everything like that, just think of three things. Have monofocus. Starve your distractions, feed your focus. The second is make sure you have micro wins. Micro wins are the little habits every day. I feel great because I've already
Mm.
ticked a couple of things off my schedule already. I feel the habits that I have, and I look at habits and I go, what are the habits that will give me that will have a sense of accomplishment, but help me be joyful, help me be, in a position where I feel like I've accomplished already. And so, you need those micro wins, those, daily habits because you know, people create, people create habits and habits form futures. So really getting clear on that. And then of course, what's the momentum mindset? What's the mindset of those six I just shared with you? What do you need to do? What mindset do you need to focus on? And when you accomplish the momentum mindset and the micro wins, and then that mono focus of what's the one thing I need to focus on, what's the one thing I need to let go of, then all of a sudden you accelerate yourself towards what's important, what matters, and what's going to make a difference to you and to the people who mean the world to you. So you can be the best version of yourself, not the second best version of somebody else.
Yeah, very, very true. Is that the best place to start, Keith, with those sorts of daily habits? I'm just thinking, someone who's listening or watching this, and what you've said's really resonated. It's really hit home from the for them, and they're thinking, yeah, absolutely. I want to take more control, if you like. I want to make those choices for myself and want to move towards, X, Y, and Z goals. Where do they start? Like, what are the first things they should do?
Well, I think you've got to start with how you want to feel. And so, because if you say to yourself, and this is where we complete the loop, Emma, because you go, well, I want to feel successful. Great. What's a daily habit you need to do for you to feel successful? I want to feel happy. Great. What's a daily habit that you need to do so that you feel happy about who you are, what you do, and how you do it? I want to feel purposeful. Great. What's the daily, so it comes back to that. But where I'd start is I'd go big picture. I'd get people to start writing down a list of 100 things they want to do in their life. And for those people, if you want to go to my website, keithabraham.com, if you go to resources, there's the worksheet to actually, I could never write down 100 things I want to do in my life. Oh, yes, you can. Because all I have to do is ask you 25 questions. Because if I ask you 25 questions, you'll come up with 4 answers. But in reality, I'll ask you 25 questions. There'll be some of the questions you'll write down nothing, and others you'll write down 10 answers. And so I'd start there. I'd start with the big picture. Then I'd come to thinking about, right, what do I want to accomplish in 2026? How do I and go through the 4 areas of your life: personal, professional, physical, profitable, sticking with all the P's, and that's I'm not a company geek. No, personal profitability. What you want to save, what you want
mm,
to invest in, what you want to, purchase. And then so then once I pick that area, then I just go through that how formula and go, how do I want to feel professionally? How do I want to feel personally? How do I want to feel, physically? How do I want to feel, about my finances? And and don't be surprised if it's the similar type of emotion in, 2 or 3 out of the 4. And if you're not quite sure how you want to feel, you can always go to another one of my websites, mygoaldriver.com, and you can do a little diagnostic tool there that will actually tell you what your emotional driver is to the area of your life that you want to focus on. And pretty, about 90% accurate. So it's really up there from an accuracy point of view.
mm,
And you can do that for free. And then I'd then just go and say, okay, what's the one goal that I need to achieve professionally? What's the one goal I need to feel, you know? And once you've looked at those goals, then sort of just go back through and go, why is that goal important to me? And then who can help me achieve it? And just start there, because out of that you'll go, okay. And then, from there you go, okay, so if I want to feel successful, and this is the goal I want to achieve. Well, what do I need to feel? What do I need to do every day or at least 5 out of 7 days, or
mm.
4 out of 7 days, or 7 out of 7 days? What do I need to do to feel that emotion? And that's where people should start.
Do you think the sort of annual approach, I mean, I said it at the top of the episode, didn't I, about, coming to the end of the year and invariably we all start thinking about what do I want to achieve next year or what do I want next year to look like? How do I want to feel about next year? Is that actually useful using that sort of annualized approach? Do you think it's the best way
What
of
I
going
tend
about
to
it?
so I what I tend to do is obviously have, I've got long-term goals. I have,
Mm,
yearly goals. But then what I tend to do then, Emma, is my planning process is I tend to work in threes. And so every day, what are the 3 things I need to accomplish? Oh, Keith, I got 23 things I need to accomplish every day. Well, but what are the first 3? Because you're never going to do all 23 unless you do the first 3. So so I tend to, the night before, work out the 3 I need to do the next day. I tend to do this week for next week the 3 things I want to accomplish for the following week. I tend to do the 3 things, I sit down and go, what are the 3 things I need to accomplish next month for the month? So I just if it would, depending on the time frame, it will be, I just tend to work in threes. I go, what's the 3 things? If these are the 3 goals I want to achieve this year, what are the 3 things I need to do for the quarter? And everything has a cascading effect. So we have alignment with that. And then, but Keith, you talked about 4 areas. Yeah, I then tend to have, Emma, the big bold goal. So the big bold goal is, if I could achieve nothing else this year, what would be the big, bold goal that I would sit back at the end of the year and celebrate and say, I've had an absolutely unbelievably fabulous, fantastic, sensational year? What would be that big, bold goal? Because what we tend to find is, when we are trying to do lots of little things, there is always lots of little things to do to achieve lots of little things. And if you have a big, bold goal, then what you do is, I just need to accomplish this. This will be the catalyst. This will be the first domino. This will be the rock that
mm.
cascades into everything else. And so that's the so whether you do that annually, whether you start right now, why wait? We got
Yeah.
almost a month to go before the end of the year. So why not start now? What could I accomplish? Here's the question I'm asking myself right now: is what do I need to accomplish in the next, month, 6 weeks, to set myself up for 2026?
Yeah.
And I just created a list yesterday of going, oh, these are the things, these are the projects I need to nail down in my business. that will what same set me up for a fabulous 2026 where I'm, where it just catapults me into the next level, in that real transformational shift.
Mm. There's almost a potential for kind of inbuilt procrastination there, isn't there? Because whilst there's the positives of, how do I want that year to look? What's the big bold goal of the year? The kind of underlying subtext is, "Oh, well, I'll just wait till next year."
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
as you
yeah,
say, what
absolutely.
can you do now? Yeah.
Well, look, procrastination is the greatest robber of self-esteem and self-confidence. If you know you should do something and you don't do it, it eats away at you.
Yeah.
So, what's the easiest way to beat procrastination? Just take the first step. Forget about finishing
Action.
and
Yeah.
just spend all the time on just taking that first step and make the first step really easy. Because if you take the first step, you're more inclined to take the next and then the next and then the next and then the next. But for people, it's just, it's always starting is the hardest thing. Just think of, here's what I'd say to all your listeners and watchers in your podcast, Emma, is take the next 4 to 6 weeks and think of it as an on ramp to 2026. So when you get on the
Mm.
motorway, on the freeway, you don't come to an intersection and then turn onto it. You always go on an on ramp. treat the next
Yeah.
treat the next 4 to 6 weeks as the on ramp and be able to start 2026 after your Christmas break going, I've got things in place so I can accelerate into that
Mhm.
into the onto that highway, onto that motorway, towards my goals a lot faster.
Great analogy. I really like that. Yeah, that's awesome. Final question, Keith. It's always the final question here, and that is, what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Well, who's accelerate everything? Humble yourself enough to rely on mentors, coaches, on, whether it's a great book or a great podcast or an audio book, just invest in yourself. I love that quote. If you don't invest time, energy, and money in yourself, you're a poor judge of a good investment. I would, I would have invested in a lot more experts in my business rather than trying to do stuff myself. There's certain things that I'm very, very good at. There's other things that I'm not that good at. I would absolutely have delegated more of them. And I've done that a lot in my, you know, second half of my business career, but I would have done that a lot earlier and sooner. So that would be the advice I'd give people.
Thank you, Keith. So much in there, really, really helpful, and a lot I think for people to take away. You mentioned a couple of resources as we were talking there. One was your main website, and the other was a tool. Could you just
Yeah,
mention
certainly.
those again for people?
KeithAbraham.com, KeithAbraham.com. There's heaps of resources and videos there that people can access for free that will help them in that goal setting process. If they want to understand their diagnostic, to what really drives them, and we've spent 9 years of research around this, worked with a PhD in psychometric testing, a PhD in statistical analysis to create a diagnostic tool, which I call Goal Driver. They go on, they go online, they pick the area of their life, they choose a goal they want to achieve in that area, and then it just asks them 10 sets of words. And what pops out the other end of it is a 6-page report. Gives you about 12 insights on what will speed you up, what's slowing you down, what are some of your fears, what's the best mindset for you along those lines. And so that's mygoaldriver.com. And of course, if somebody is looking for a speaker for their event, you just go to my normal website. And what I do is I talk about two things. One is how to help people achieve their goals faster, easier, sooner to accomplish infinite possibilities. And the second is around being a commercially conscious leader. So how do we build leaders that have got a growth mindset around them? They don't have to be in a sales. Growth is about making money, saving money, helping people
Mhm.
become more productive. So always happy to chat with people and see if I'm the right fit for their business.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith. I've really personally really enjoyed that and found it very, very interesting, and hopefully the listeners did too. But yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Appreciate the opportunity. All the best.